we doing, paranormal peeps? I'm your host, Charlie Cage, and today I'm joined by my co host, Colton Smith. Now, before we jump into this, if you've had an encounter or an experience you'd like to share, go ahead and email it to us at paranormalcryptidcommittee@gmail.com. That is paranormalcryptidcommittee@gmail.com. It's going to be in all lower cases. Hopefully we didn't bore you with all that stuff. Today I am extremely excited to announce that we have a very knowledgeable guest in our presence, especially about what we do in cryptozoology and the paranormal. Now, Colton, before you judge me, because I know you don't like TikTok a lot. I was scrolling down on TikTok like maybe a week or two ago, and I as any teenager our age does, and I came across a channel under the name of the Lore Lodge, and I'm gonna be honest. I was kind of skeptical at first because of all the different weird things that I've seen on TikTok, the misinformation and stuff. But the more I started watching his content, the more I was like, hey, that's pretty good. It was pretty. He knew what he was talking about, and not only that, but he was extremely interested in his knowledge of what he was doing. He had a passion for what he was doing, and I saw that, and I was like, I'm glad that somebody like that is doing something in our field. And he's I kind of want to say he's kind of new to the field, but not really. But yeah. So without any ado, our guest today is the Lord of the Lodge, Aidan Matthis. How are you today, Aidan?
Hey guys, I'm good. I love Lord of the Lodge. I haven't heard that one yet. But yeah, totally fair to describe me as new to the field, by the way. I've been interested in this stuff for a very long time, but I didn't actually really start creating content with it until a few weeks ago. It's been kind of a stunning welcome to the community.
Of course. And you know what? I would like to how about we start off with that real quick. So what was it that first got your interest in either the paranormal or cryptozoology or even both?
I think, God, I got to go back pretty far for that one. I think definitely the most influential thing for me was when I was 9 years old. I had what I would only refer to as a paranormal encounter in a friend of mine's basement, and ever since that, I had a penchant for believing in things. I was never really big on the Bigfoot thing, but when it came to more of the ghosts and demons and stuff like that, that piqued my interest a lot. And then when I was in 5th or 6th grade, my friends and I all started watching Supernatural. This is back when you had to order DVDs off Netflix.
Wow.
So I know I don't look like I'm that old, but I am in fact that old. And yeah, so we started watching Supernatural. We started like midway through. I think we were watching like season 3, and then we went back and restarted it. And the one that really got me interested in all of it was the Wendigo episode. What I now refer to affectionately as the flesh pedestrian, the fleshy boy.
Yeah.
Whatever I particularly feel like calling it. But I've said the word enough times at this point. Somebody told me there's a support group for all the demons I've summoned. And yeah, so at that point, that was when it really took off, and I was like, all right, there's all sorts of different wikis on the internet, and you can find all these different media sources for it, and I started looking into it a lot. And then I know this is getting long-winded, but I got into Mr. Ballin's content a few months ago, and he was talking about the missing 411 cases. And something about that just sparked a memory for me of watching that episode of Supernatural a decade ago. And I was like, wait a second. And I went back and I looked through the lore and I was like, this all fits together way too well. I don't trust the government as far as I can throw the Capitol building. And I started looking into it and the David Paulides stuff, and that is where sort of this most recent genuine interest in doing this and kind of me shifting to doing it full time came from, was that missing person stuff, because that's when it started to click for me. Oh, this is real. This is not something that, it's not a bunch of Native Americans just telling scary stories to scare people off the reservation. Like, this is something that's real. It's something that's out there, and it's something that people need to know about. And if this is real, what else could be real out there? What else have we kind of written off as a society as urban legend that could be something corporeal, something that we actually need to worry about? And I would say that's how we got to where we are right now.
that you actually started off with a really good point about Mr. Ballin, and more importantly the man who researched all of it, Mr. David Paulides, with his many books. And I wanted to go ahead and jump into Missing 411 right off the bat, since you brought it up already. So as an homage to one of our previous podcaster, I'm going to go ahead and ask you this question. Do you believe that fleshy boys, Bigfoot, dogmen, or any other sort of cryptid, do you think they're responsible for some or maybe even all of the missing 411 reports in our national forest, or do you think there's something else that's occurring?
I am firmly of the belief that they are responsible for at least some of them. Some of the ones that come to mind for me are, I can't remember the names off the top of my head right now, but there was one case that stuck out where it was 4 guys and they were hiking in a straight line, just in a column, and the one guy was saying how every couple minutes he would check back to make sure that the 4th guy in the line was good and wasn't straggling or anything. And, he checked back behind him, he was still there, checked back behind him, still there, checked back behind him, he's gone. All that's left of him is some stuff that looked like, change that had fallen out of his pocket, which implied that he had been lifted and turned upside down and carried off. They found one of his shoes off the trail. They found another one of his shoes a ways off, and then after that, he was never found. And I'm sitting there going, okay, bears don't do that. People aren't big enough to just lift somebody off the ground and hang them upside down to the point where change falls out of their pockets. And what was up with the shoes? Like, something like that is so completely out of the realm of rational explanation that you have to jump into the irrational explanations. Like, there's got to be something we're missing here. There's a piece of this puzzle that absolutely does not fit. So the ones like that, like the Dennis Martin case, where the Green Berets were involved.
Yes.
The Green Berets don't do search and rescue within the United States. So stuff like that, there, in my mind, there is no doubt that something out there is responsible, and that was the theory that initially got me a little bit of a following on TikTok. Was I was saying, I think the exact words I used were the National Park Service is a cover-up. It's a way for the government to cordon off and monitor something that they know is there that's responsible for these disappearances. Teddy Roosevelt was a hell of an outdoorsman. It was his brainchild. Teddy Roosevelt supposedly has had an encounter with something like what we describe as Bigfoot, which he was very open about. And if you know anything about Teddy Roosevelt, he was not one to make things up. So yeah, I absolutely think that there is something out there that is to blame for at least some of these missing 411 cases, because they just get so absurd and beyond the realm of somebody just wandering off and falling into a ditch.
Yeah, no, you're definitely not the only one in that, that whole camp that the national forests are a cover up. There are a lot of people that believe that. Personally, I do too, to a certain extent. I don't know how my co-host here feels about it.
I didn't even think about that it could be a cover up. Like, but now that you said it, that does make a lot of sense.
Now, were you gonna say something?
No, I can just see the gears turning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens a lot with him. I was gonna go ahead and say, sort of along the lines of, I just wanted to bring it up real quick. That you mentioned the Dennis Martin case. Now, I honestly, that's one of my favorite. Oh, I don't mean that I don't mean that in a
Yeah, you don't
way.
mean it disrespectfully.
Yes, no, it's. I find it very interesting because what people reported, is so there was a family that saw a creature carrying off a kid, what looked to be a kid, and they described it as a humanoid type of wild man. And I did some digging around, and in that area, there are there in the Sasquatch or Bigfoot community, there generally are 10 regarded types of Bigfoot, and the type that is found in that area is a
10?
type 2, which is basically a prehistoric hominid. So,
Like the classic one.
yeah, no,
Well,
no, like Neanderthal,
oh,
Like-
caveman
like,
style.
caveman style.
Oh, okay, so not like Gigantopithecus.
No.
Okay,
That would be more of a type 1, but patty type, which is seen in the Patterson-Gimlin film. Yes.
got it.
I just wanted to bring that up because I don't know, I found it interesting when I started doing the research for that one. So, without any further ado, personally, do you think that what are your thoughts on what the fleshy boy actually is?
So, I have a few thoughts, and when I talk about them on TikTok and on YouTube, I'm always very careful to differentiate whether I'm talking about the specific Native American tradition of a Wendigo or a Skinwalker or a Nulucephalia, any of those things, versus what I'm talking about with kind of this archetype that, as I'm looking more and more into it, I'm noticing a pattern. So, in my personal belief, and this is not a slight in any way against the indigenous beliefs about it, I'm a Methodist Christian. I went to school and got a religious studies minor, and I focused primarily on Christianity, and I did a lot of Bible study. And there was one thing that stuck out to me. Again, one of those moments that something clicked for me very recently was the Nephilim in the Bible, which means those who fell. And there's a passage in Genesis 6 where I believe there were giants in the earth in those days. The term giants is actually, in the original text, Nephilim, which means those who fell. And in the canon Bible, the scholarly opinion is often the rational one, which is that they meant those who fell upon others. So a barbarous, violent tribe of people. And this is antediluvian. This is pre Noah's Ark. It's actually the immediate event preceding Noah's Ark in the Bible. Is this passage about Nephilim, and it refers to the sons of God coming in unto the daughters of men and having children with them. So, and sons of God in the Bible is very often, almost exclusively used to mean angels. So there's not really, it's a very unique instance in the Bible, but there's not really another way to look at it if you're being textually specific, which as a Methodist, that's what we that's what we do. Is you kind of put aside the tradition and the dogma, and you look at the actual scripture and go from there. And then there's another passage where it's mentioned they use the word Nephilim, and that's in Numbers 13:33. And they're talking again about a violent tribe of very large, very strong humans, the Anak. And again, the scholarly opinion is, oh, well, they were just an unusually large tribe of men. Maybe they ate more meat than those who surrounded them. We don't know. But that's if you take the canon Bible. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize about the Christian and Jewish faiths is that what we have as the Bible today is a collection of what the early church deemed to be the consistent story of the faith. So there's a lot of, we don't read the Gospel of Timothy in church because it's not considered canon, because there are some places where it contradicts Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But it also tells a lot of things that don't contradict, but that's considered apocryphal. And there's another book of the Bible, the Book of Enoch, which is referenced a little too much in the TV show Supernatural. They rely on it a little bit too heavily, but that's where they get a lot of their demonology and a lot of their lore about angels. So Enoch references Nephilim a lot, and he's talking about a mixed race of angels and men. And if you look at Christianity and then Norse paganism and Greco-Roman paganism and Celtic and Middle Eastern and all these things, what you get is a lot of references to demigods and half-breed creatures that come from gods mating with humans and beasts and things like that. And where I'm kind of netting out on it is I don't think those are necessarily contradictory to what you have in the Judeo-Christian tradition. What you have in the Judeo-Christian tradition is a passage which says there was a race of giants, and they had superhuman qualities, and they were evil and wicked, and God decided to flood the entire world to get rid of essentially this, as well as the wickedness of man. Almost every culture on Earth has a flood myth. The Younger Dryas period of approximately 12.5 to 11,500 years ago was a massive glacial melting period, and we know that the sea level rose significantly. Plato cites 9,000 years before he was writing as the time that Atlantis sank, and that happens to be the exact period of the Younger Dryas. And everyone's got stories of giants and mythological beings that are the sons of gods and men. And when you look at all of that in context, which I, as a historian, do, what you get is a pretty consistent narrative, actually, about semi-divine beings and the monsters that result from their gallivanting across Earth, mating with whatever looks at them the right way. And so I think when you look at, think about the flood and what might have come after it, I think that there is something that survived, some sort of monster, whether it's an actual species or whether we're looking at a series of individuals that were the result of these unholy unions between divinity and mortal. I think that is what you're looking at in the traditions of skinwalkers and wendigos and Leshy and maybe Strigoi, the Tuatha De Danann, the Norse deities, the Jotnar, all these things that we have that kind of share a specific set of characteristics. I think we're looking at an archetype of a creature that is the result of, to put it just as it is, the divine mating with the mortal.
That's a very interesting answer that you brought up. Personally, you came. I don't know how to describe it. But what you described, what you were saying, makes me, think that quite possibly that could be what happened. It's funny that you bring up the Book of Enoch because, yeah, not a lot of people know. Well, let me rephrase that. Not a lot of people are familiar with it.
Mhm.
Of course, they'll know the name of it, but the actual contents is always like they never know exactly what we're talking about. But I think the way that you're headed with your theory about this is honestly, I'm kind of on board with it. What about you, Colton?
I think it's a pretty cool idea that a whole bunch of areas have the same kind of, I guess, subjects in common.
Yeah, I was gonna go ahead and mention. It's funny that you said something about about them surviving the Great Flood. Um, that makes me if that is the case, are they the only ones that survived the Great Flood? That's what brings up another question.
So biblically, there's a common misconception that when the biblical flood occurred, it wiped out everything on Earth except what was in Noah's Ark. Uh, Noah gets off the Ark, and he has all the animals and everything, and because it's kind of glossed over, there's this misconception that Noah's family was all that survived. We know that's not true. Um, and whether you're looking at it just from a biblical standpoint, where it's not said that everything on Earth was wiped out, uh, it's basically said there was mass destruction and devastation, and that lots of people died, but it doesn't say that all of humanity was wiped out by the flood. Archaeologically, we know that can't be the case. Uh, you know, basically no matter where you net out, there's no way that the only things that survived the flood were what was on Noah's Ark. Um, and you have to go with an extraordinarily literal and uh, a very literal interpretation of biblical text to get the story that Noah's family was all that survived the flood, and a lot of that comes from medieval Catholicism more than it does from any other period in church history, because it was very difficult to explain to medieval peasantry in an hour on Sunday what their belief system was. So you get a lot of stuff that in Catholic and pre-Protestant, pre-Reformation religion is kind of simplistic and dumbed down almost, because they had to present it to an audience that was going to struggle to understand it, that was illiterate, that this was basically the only time of the week that they weren't working. So yeah, I that's the thing, is I know I'm extremely long-winded about this. Can you tell I'm Italian? But yeah, so I don't think they would be the only thing that survived the flood, but I think that you would definitely see that there would be a certain type of being that survived the flood.
Yeah. So going back to you gave us your thoughts about what you think it could be. Now, what do you consider them? And when I say that, I mean it in a sense of, are these physical? Are they ethereal, or are they spiritual in nature? Or do you think they possess? They can be all three, or maybe two of these, or you know.
Oh my god, Archie, dude, chill out. Sorry, he's a 25-pound American Eskimo, and he thinks he can take on the world. Don't make me put you in your room. I'll do it. I won't hesitate. Yeah, I know. Chill. It's okay. Come here. Sorry about that. Yeah. So with the it's interesting. So the Skinwalker tradition, they can merge into the astral plane, and with Wendigos, it's not so much. But there's, and that's why I think this gets very complicated. Is there are multiple traditions with Wendigos, and that's that some of the traditions are that it's a spirit that possesses a human, which is much closer to the Skinwalker tradition, which is that it's a human who uses black magic. And then there's the version where Wendigos specifically are something that happens when people commit acts of cannibalism. So I think that it's entirely possible that we're dealing with a set of beings here. And when you look at some of the other folklore from around the world, specifically when you get into Northern Europe with the Gaelic traditions of the Tuatha De Danann and the Seed and the Otherworld, when you get into the Nordic tradition with Yggdrasil and the passing between worlds, when you get into Christianity, there's the idea of heaven and hell, which we don't really think about it, but when you actually examine what you're talking about there, you're talking about multiple dimensions, because heaven and hell are not within the same plane that we exist. So Christianity is canonically a multidimensional faith. Same with Hinduism, with a lot of African faiths. So there's definitely something to be said for multidimensional travel. I think when we're talking about something like the Wendigo and whatever is kidnapping people in the national parks, I think that's probably something solely corporeal, something physical, some sort of apex predator that's hiding out in the cave systems. But I think that it's entirely possible that some of these traditions also stem from maybe something else, or maybe a similar creature, or I don't want to use the term God, but a divine being. Yeah, a divine being that fathered them, that travels between dimensions. I think it's very possible that we're talking about 2 or 3 different creatures here. In terms of like taxonomy, like we're not talking about just one being that's out there. Like with Bigfoot, how you said 10 different types that people discuss. I think it could easily be the same with whatever the flesh pedestrian actually is. It's probably a mix of a few beings, or one being with some special powers to maybe. So like with Celtic tradition, you have the Sheath, which are, and this is specifically Gaelic tradition that I'm citing right now, but the idea of these fairy mounds where you can enter through what is a physical portal and you can step out of time into the other world, and then you can, through another place, step back into time, somewhere else on the time spiral. I think that's also entirely possible. What if we're talking about something here that's not necessarily taking people and dragging them into caves, but taking people, dragging them into the other world and somewhere else in time? It really depends on how deep you want to get into what you believe about multidimensional theory and, to an extent, I guess, magic. But that's kind of the thing about this, is that you can follow the rabbit hole really deep. But even at the very base level, I think it's important to pitch to people when you're discussing this at first with them. It's important to start with the most rational version of it, which is that there is a superhuman, I'm not using that in terms of like superpowers, but much stronger and faster than we are, creature that is dragging people into caves and consuming them. And then if they want to have the further discussion of, well, what about if it's dragging them into another dimension? What if it's a semi-divine being? What if it's something from the spirit world? What if this is the, wrath of God set upon man? It really depends where you want to take them in the conversation. But I think that when it comes to awareness of the subject, especially regarding things like the missing 411 theory and the skinwalkers and the Wendigos, that's those things that are very objectively a phenomenon that we're experiencing. Start the conversation with there's something physical dragging people into the caves. That I 100% believe. The rest of it from that point on is almost philosophical. But from that point on, it becomes very much theory. But there is a very real segment of it that is physical. I got to get better at being concise if I'm going to be a professor.
I was gonna mention the only reason I asked is because just like with the flesh pedestrians, with there are different cryptids, and people report them as well. Surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, I mean, you would kind of expect it since it is the animal kingdom to a sort of extent out of the woods. There are reports of these creatures that we refer to flesh pedestrians. Um, there are reports of people seeing them fighting with different cryptids. Most notably, they're often seen fighting against a cryptid known as a dogman. Personally, I don't like the term because it makes them seem friendly and super cute, and it's not really.
Right.
They're pretty
Not
ferocious.
what they are.
Yeah, no, they are extremely ferocious cryptids, especially if it's a Type 3 variant 1. They're very aggressive creatures, but they're not known to be, you know, they're not known to attack people. They're just
Mhm.
super territorial.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to bring up the fact of what do you think about different cryptids possibly fighting for territory or maybe food with the flesh pedestrians?
Yeah. So with the flesh pedestrian idea specifically, I think that might be part of why they prefer to lure people off of trails and to use stealth, and why they probably inhabit these cave systems is because I think they're territorial, but they're also few in number, and I don't think they reproduce. And I think they have an awareness of that. Um, I think we're talking about something that's intelligent, and that if it were to get into a conflict with another creature, like I think it's funny that we call it the dog man when it's so incredibly similar to the werewolf.
I mean, technically, I don't like saying werewolf because werewolf implies that it was human to begin with
Yeah,
the transformation, whereas Dogman it was always what it is, you know. And that's why I
right.
kind of stay away from werewolf, but I don't like the name Dogman either. So I'm kind of like,
Yeah,
it's a
it's
catch-22.
What if you just call it like a
what
lichen? Or does that also mean like werewolf?
Lycan has its own. Yeah, that's its own thing.
Never mind then.
Look at you,
Yeah,
being real smart.
So I think with the situation with flesh pedestrians is, yeah, you do get reports of them fighting with other things. You got to again take into account how much is people just trying to stir up some controversy and stir up a good news story. But if they were to encounter something else, they do seem extremely territorial. They seem like they're solitary. Uh, I would not be shocked if you found something fighting something. The one thing that gets me about it is that we don't find skeletons. We don't find the corpses of these things, and that's something that's brought up to me a lot. Is, well, if it existed, shouldn't we have found a body by now? And that leads me to believe that if it is fighting things, it's doing a damn good job of it. It's winning.
I will say real quick that Mother Nature is incredible at moving bodies.
Oh yeah.
There was a TED Talk I watched where they were discussing about how vultures and the animals in the desert, the Chihuahuan desert, are great at moving like dead bodies of uh, people trying to move across it, and how they used the experiment with the dead pig with a tracker in it, and they could only find like 3 bones after like a day. Like they could not find the rest of it.
Yeah, there's absolutely that to take into account as well. Yeah, and I mean, when you think about where these things are encountered, um, it's like the deep woods, and a lot of the Dogman legends are them attacking people on the highway. Not attacking people, but showing up, jumping on a car or crossing the road or something like that. That's not where you hear about Wendigos. However, the Dogman is a primarily, to my understanding, a northern Midwest tradition, but they have a lot of similarities in that sense to skinwalkers in the Southwest, where they'll be seen along highways. And I think my favorite is the idea that you'll be driving along a road in Utah and something will knock on your window when you're driving 70 miles per hour. That the skinwalker seems much more like the Dogman than the Wendigo does, but the Wendigo and the Dogman would be more in the same territory.
I was gonna interject real quickly. As for the Dogmen, and since I do, a lot of research on their encounters, because they're kind of like my favorite cryptid. They're actually, even though they're most notably known for, from states like the Michigan Dogman and then the Beast of Lbl in Wisconsin, they are actually a lot more widespread than you would think.
Are they?
Sort of like Bigfoot, they're extremely widespread throughout the United States, with them being all the way from Georgia to California and everything in between. They're I don't want to say they're common, but it's not rare that you would see a Dogman somewhere outside of the Southwest or the Northwest. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely. I mean, just to get to the root of the question, like, would they fight? Could you see a Deadliest Warrior match between the Flesh Pedestrian and the Dogman? Yeah, absolutely. I just think I think the Flesh Pedestrian has all the advantages.
Honestly, I might debate with you on this one, because there are a lot of encounters of Dogmen having just hate the word of them having extreme feats of strength, and not only that, but the biting power you would imagine would be horrifying. Not only that, but you have, of course, every tool of a. Basically, you got the tools of a wolf with the smarts of a human, and I think they could give the Flesh Pedestrians a run for their money, only if they were in a pack. If
Yeah,
this was
that's
like a solitary Dogman, an alpha solitary Dogman, which are typically like around 8 to 9 feet tall, around maybe 800 pounds or somewhere around there, maybe.
silverback gorilla.
I'm gonna tell you right now, Bigfoot are a lot bigger when it comes to weights and heights. Are talking about like 13 feet.
10. Yeah, I was gonna say 10 to 12 feet and like 1,400 pounds, right?
Yeah, but if we're talking about an alpha Dogman, maybe. But if we're talking about maybe like a young, like juvenile, or maybe even like a not aggressive Dogman against a Flesh Pedestrian, then yeah, Flesh Pedestrian wins hands down. But when it comes to an alpha, I'd have to say flip a coin on that one, because.
Yeah, what's out of curiosity, because I don't know as much about the Dogmen. Is there a relationship between them and cave systems?
It's funny that you bring it up. Yes, there is. Though it's not as heavily implied, because we're not usually seen with them. But it is, along with Bigfoot, it is usually hypothesized that they use cave systems to maneuver around during the day. And that's why some people think that Bigfoot just vanished, or that Dogman just vanished out of thin air. Well, no, they just went inside of a little cave that you probably couldn't see.
Yeah,
That's how they move around. But
I don't know how people. Caving is terrifying.
I'm not privy to any of that knowledge yet. I could be wrong.
Yeah, a little bit off topic, but I don't understand how people go caving. It is, to this day, I will never. I will, and I understand if it's like a big cavern and there's like crystals and everything, and you're just going around and see it. But when it's people who are like squeezing through super tight little corridors 100 feet underground, like that is so incredibly alien to me. And then also one of my favorite horror movies is The Descent. And just like I don't want to go anywhere. Have you seen it?
No, but I've heard about it.
It's terrifying. Great movie, absolutely phenomenal movie. But and living near the Appalachian Mountains, as I have my whole life, it's one of those things that you're like, yeah, that's a little too plausible. But yeah, that's another one that's related to the cave systems. Is the monster in that movie, the crawlers, is they're almost in the same category as what we're talking about here, except they're pack animals, and they're also like blind and have a terrible sense of smell. So they're a little bit different, but they're definitely one of my favorite. I think like clearly fictional monsters. Just the caves made me think about it. I hate caves. I would rather die. I would rather just somebody simply shoot me than make me go into a cave.
Meanwhile, all the fleshy boys are having a raven there.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting that you brought up caves, because I always think of that picture where on the top it's like missing people when like they're most located at, and then like the biggest unknown cave systems in the U.S. and they match up almost perfectly.
Oh yeah. And my favorite is the people who are like, oh well, the missing 411 people are just getting lost, like they're falling into caves. And I'm like, have you ever been in a cave? Have you ever gone hiking? Have you been in the outdoors? Like, what are you talking? Do you know how hard it is to get into a cave? They're not just holes in the ground. I mean, there are places where there's like caved in mine shafts and you can fall into them, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about somebody disappearing from within a group of hikers and never being found, and it's near a cave system. They're not going missing like while spelunking. So what are you talking about when you say, oh, well, they're just going missing in the caves? Like, no. Something is dragging them into the caves, and they're like, oh, maybe it's the bears. Bears don't actually live in, like, those kinds of caves. They live in, like, rocky, like, enclaves. It's just... People want, like, to put everything into neat little rational boxes, and that is not the world we live in.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. When everybody wants to put something in one category and say, this is the end all be all, there's nothing else. As they say, ignorance is bliss, I guess.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that it's with the cave systems, or even nature in general, with 411 in general, I brought this up quite a couple of times. Sometimes people forget how stupid we can get.
Oh God.
Like
People are dumb.
we're the same people who ate Tide Pods. I mean, come on. Getting lost in the woods is it's probably very normal.
Yeah.
For intelligence,
especially if you're very inexperienced and it's like your first time there.
Yeah, it's the stories of people just like who go solo camping and disappear. Those ones don't bug me as much because like
it's more explainable.
That was a stupid thing to do in the first place, and there were no witnesses. The stories of like hunters who are in groups and one of them disappears, those ones get me. And when you guys, I cannot for the life of me remember their names or the location off the top of my head, which is bad. But the guys who, I feel like it was in New York for some reason, they had this campsite up in the mountains, and they reported that they were camping one night, and they had built a shelter and everything out of some sticks and logs, and they heard some calls from the woods that were being answered by other creatures. So it was clearly a pack of them, and they went and huddled inside their shelter and like pulled the log closed, and they reported just for hours just hearing these sounds of grunts and whistles and all sorts of stuff coming from the woods and things shuffling outside. And just like, you have stuff like that. That's not a bear. Like, everyone wants to say that's a bear. and I just don't understand the propensity for human beings to just want to blame everything on bears. Um, but like when you hear stuff like that, and they had audio and video recorded to this incident, that like when it was in when they had forensic, you know, a forensics team examine it, they were like, yeah, this was not edited. This is just raw audio. How do you hear a story like that and not think Bigfoot or Wendigo or something paranormal? People are strange and devoted to taxonomy in a way that I will never understand. Because there's nothing scientific about saying Bigfoot's not real. And I'm not saying I'm not saying I even actively believe that there is a creature known as Bigfoot. I'm just saying that to look at it and to go, well, because we don't have evidence it exists, it doesn't. That's not the scientific method. And these are the kinds of people who will champion science and just be like, oh, well, since we can't prove it's there, that means it's not. Like, you also can't, there's tons of things that we can't prove in science. There are things that we denote by the perceived lack of evidence of them. Antimatter and black holes and things like that we perceive simply because of what is not there rather than what is there. A black hole we observe through a light anomaly, a gravitational anomaly, where we look out and we see, well, that light is not behaving the way it's supposed to. There must be something there. Why do we not look at people who go missing? Why do we look at that and we say, oh, well, there's no evidence that something took them, therefore nothing took them. Like, no, let's look at it and say they shouldn't have gone missing. There's no explanation. Let's look for one. Instead, people just want to discount it and say that's, because there's no evidence of something weird, nothing weird happened. There's no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was whacked, but Jeffrey Epstein was certainly whacked. I don't know. People drive me nuts.
John McAfee.
Oh, John McAfee was absolutely whacked.
You see that?
He had a tattoo that said "schwacked." Like, I followed John McAfee on Twitter for years. That man was living the life.
Honestly,
I tell all my friends, especially since I've been kind of blowing up a little bit for the whole National Park Service as a conspiracy thing. I've been telling all my friends pretty actively, like, hey guys, just so you know, if I unalive myself, no, I didn't. If I go missing, call the Park Service because they have me. But yeah, it's wild. The government does wild stuff all the time and doesn't tell us about it.
No.
Like the Tuskegee experiments, MK Ultra, whatever the hell they did to Ted Kaczynski.
Is this a letter from Ted Kaczynski?
Uh-oh. Don't open that.
No, but it's funny that you bring up, getting whacked. Well, that's not funny, but act of getting whacked. But what I'm trying to say here, it's funny that you bring up the cover-up thing again, with the parks, specifically either the Fish and Game or the National Park Service. There are other content creators that research, of course, cryptozoology and not so much with paranormal, but more actually cryptozoology. There's a man that works for the what is it called? The Dogman Research Project. No,
Right.
Sorry, the North American Dogman Project. That's what it is. The North American Dogman Project. His name is Jody Cook. He is a retired officer. I believe he was also in the military for some time, and he spends a lot of time researching and collecting things about the cryptid known as a Dogman. And many times, he's gotten harassed by government entities, or so he claims. Mm-hmm. It's to the point. There's a certain area called LBL, Land Between the Lakes. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with at least the name. He has been basically him and anybody that's associated with his group, the NADP, is basically on a do not allow entrance into national parks, according to him. And
Right.
yeah, and it's funny because ever since he started working with it, he's been harassed by the government many times to the point that they're not even letting his organization members inside the park anymore. And what's so special about the national park of LBL is something called the Beast of Lbl. Are you familiar with that or?
I can't say I am.
Okay, so I'll give you a rundown. It's sort of grisly because of what occurred there, but I have the case file right here.
Came prepared.
Yeah, this is kind of the things I kind of document.
Freshly printed too.
No, they've been printed for quite some time actually.
Have they?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So apparently it had happened somewhere in the 1980s, in the early 1980s. And let's see. The report first came from a lady named Jan Thompson. She was working at a diner, and she ran into two officers that apparently had been on the scene at a scene inside the park. Apparently, what had happened, what she overheard from these two officers that had gotten off their shift, is that there were supposedly there was a family that was murdered inside of their RV. Not inside of their RV, but like a family that was murdered at a park site. The father was killed outside of the father and the son were killed outside of the RV, and whatever was there knew that the mother and supposedly the daughter were inside the RV, and it had tried to get inside. It successfully did get inside. The mother tried fighting off whatever it was, and at first they didn't know that there was a fourth family member, the little girl. But eventually, they started fanning the area for whatever might have been there, after they called for backup. And apparently, this is where it gets kind of shady, because this seems right out of a Hollywood movie. And he can attest to it, because he's gone over the case with me, too. There was one of the officers felt like something coming down on his officer's hat, and he had he looked. He was like, "It's not raining," and he looked up, and there was the body of a little girl on top of a tree, hanging on top of a tree, and it's still very controversial to this day, because apparently there is this is well known in the cryptid field, and it's gotten a lot of traction lately because apparently there's somebody who says he's a survivor of this attack, which is extremely out there. But that's the whole reason Jody Cook was kicked out of the park service, because he got a hold of this case and he was researching it, trying to get all the facts on it, and he wanted to go find the actual site, but they didn't let him back inside the park or any of his organization members. But it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's and that coincides, like the famous story David Paulides tells, where he says that he called the National Park Service, or he put in a Freedom of Information Act request, and the National Park Service had a lawyer call him back and say, oh, well, we don't have a list of missing persons from the national parks. And he was like, really? That's weird. That seems like the kind of things that you should have. And they said, well, why do you want that list anyway? And he explained his reasoning. He was investigating the disappearances, and they said, oh, well, you're not going to get the list. And he was like, I thought there wasn't a list. So them covering up the fact that they definitely have a list of missing persons in the national parks. The government records everything. They're probably recording this call right now. Hi, NSA. How you doing? Yeah, it's me, your boy. But And then there's all the situations where people report that they're just like either driving or walking down, a certain path in one of the parks, and rangers will come out of nowhere and be like, "Hey, you need to leave," with no explanation in areas that are on the map marked as public lands. It's just the number of times that people report getting told by rangers they need to leave an area for no reason in a national park. It can't be a coincidence. Why are there rangers there? Why do you have rangers stationed at certain points in the park to turn people away if you're not purposefully trying to keep people out? Why is it always the same location in the park? Why is it, why are there always people there? Why are we still staffing like maybe this is a stupid thing to say. Why are we still staffing Firewatch towers when we have satellites? And much better technology than some putting two dudes with a forestry degree up in a tower and paying them $30,000 a year to stay there. Why are we doing that? I don't know. There's too many questions about it for it to be something just a coincidence. I don't see how that can be not something.
And there's a crazy parallel with this encounter and the Dennis Martin case, even though they happened extremely far away. Is that in both cases the military was called in. Now, but
I did not know about the military involvement in the second case.
In the Beast of Lbl, apparently the cover-up is that the military went in for a joint exercise with another affiliate, and that's what they said. But based on what evidence could be gathered, is they actually sent armed military men in, and that's sort of like with the Dennis Martin case, where they sent in the Green Berets to supposedly track down Dennis Martin, and not what took him. And
there's another aspect to that, by the way, that I just want to bring up, which is that the official report from the case file is that the Green Berets were working in concert with the National Park Service and with search and rescue and all these groups, and the actual the National Park Service does not stand by that. The Department of Defense does not stand by that. The Green Berets were the volunteers there do not stand by that. Nobody who talks about it after the event transpired says that the Green Berets were working in concert with search and rescue. They were operating on their own under orders that were not from search and rescue, that were not shared with everybody else. They were the methods that were being used there do not match a search and rescue operation. It matches a we're hunting something operation. And the fact that repeats over and over again in a lot of these cases, that everyone that does involve the military, that they weren't working alongside search and rescue. They were doing their own thing. That doesn't make any sense. That's not something the military does. And even if it was, you would call in the National Guard, not the Green Berets. It's just there's so much evidence that something's not right.
And there's actually something else that's extremely interesting that parallels sort of to of course everybody's infamous with your famous Mothman.
He's the best one. Mothman can beat any cryptid easily. He just chooses not to.
Mothman is the angel of death, and you cannot convince me otherwise.
But before we got off topic there,
Yeah.
in the forest near West Point. Sorry, is it West Point? West?
Yes, West Point, Virginia.
No, Point Pleasant. It's Point
Point
Pleasant,
Pleasant?
West Virginia. In the
Yeah,
forest
that's an
around
North
there,
case.
there are bunkers.
Oh yeah.
The old bunkers, and
Yeah.
these same bunkers can be found at LBL.
Mhm.
Now, the old what they explained it to be is that's where they would store TNT during World War II or any other sort of munitions. But if you look at them, well, at least the ones in LBL, you can't open them from the inside. You can only open them from the outside. Meaning, well, why do you want to hold something that you can't? You don't want to be locked in.
Yeah.
Especially back then when you didn't have extremely well even radio transmissions. To me, it doesn't make sense why they would build a bunker with no
No way out.
way out. I mean, of course you got the entrance point, but you can't like open the entrance points from the inside. You can only open it from the outside.
Right.
To me, that's just odd. It's like they built them to keep something inside, rather to to hold something inside, rather than to use it for storage.
Yeah, it doesn't make a ton of sense why you would do that.
I know I sound like a crazy
Especially
man.
considering like the propensity for if there's fail safes for everything. And if you have somebody get locked inside of something with no way to signal that they're locked inside, that's and no way to get out from the inside, that is such a wild safety hazard.
OSHA's
and-
on the walls right now.
Like it's
I will say that if what you're saying, like they're meant to keep something in and stopping it from opening the door and get out, why would they have an ability to open it from the outside and not just seal it completely to make sure no one stumbles upon it and just opens it?
You do make a good point there. I had not thought about that.
well, if they're not being used, it wouldn't be sealed.
That's another good point.
Big brain.
If it's empty, they have no reason to seal it because they're going to need to open it.
True, but I think what you're implying, Charlie, is that it was either being used to keep the beast like inside, or it was going to be used, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it was inside, they would have sealed it, unless they never got to use it. So
Unless they never got it inside.
Yeah.
But
Which would imply something even more terrifying, which is that they don't know how to kill it. Which, if the government has not figured out how to kill something, then you probably can't kill it.
It's like an SCP sort of.
and why'd you have to bring that up? You know how I feel about that. I hate SCP because it's so fake and
They're fun stories.
As someone who enjoys writing, it's a pretty fun collective art project.
it's
Thank
just,
you. That's what I've been trying to tell him, but he refuses to understand.
It's kind of
It definitely it isn't helpful to people who are taking cryptozoology and the paranormal seriously,
Exactly.
but it is a fun collective art project, and as long as you understand that it's fiction and you don't cross the two, that I think it's not a big deal. There are some really good independent short films on YouTube regarding the SCP Foundation that I can't hate it because it's so entertaining.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. A friend of ours actually showed us those, and the entire time I was shaking my head like, why? But it was
Have you seen
entertaining. It was.
Have you seen SCP Overlord?
I think that's the one that he showed us. Is that
Yeah.
where they're like floating in the
Yeah.
air? Yeah. he
Yeah,
showed
at
it
the
to
end.
us, remember?
I don't remember.
Were you not there?
I don't think I was
It's
there.
it's surprisingly well done considering it's an indie film, and they got a lot of the military movement correct, and like it was They did a good job with it, but not to derail and talk about SCPs because there's literally thousands of them.
And honestly, I'd be like wide-eyed, like I don't know what these guys are talking about.
That's me in every podcast when you're talking.
Well, well, it's because you're like the comic relief, and I'm kind of like the information guy.
I try to be, at least.
I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch the Lore Lodge podcast on Sunday, but that's very much what was kind of going on with me and my co-host was. I was talking about all this stuff, and he was just being the kind of skeptic, like comic relief on the side, like trying to keep me on track and keep me from getting too galaxy brained. If you let me talk without interrupting me for long enough, I do start to sound like Alex Jones. And while the Alex Jones was right jar is currently full to the brim, you don't want to sound like Alex Jones.
Yeah.
I mean, he's meme-tacular. You gotta admit, he's meme-tacular, but
True.
They did turn the frogs transgender, so he wasn't totally wrong.
Yeah.
Wait!
Yeah.
There were pharmaceutical byproducts that were being released into a lake that did cause the frogs to turn from male to female.
Yeah.
So when he said they're putting chemicals in the water to turn the frickin' frogs gay, like, he wasn't right, but he also wasn't wrong. Like,
but irony with this dude.
he was close enough.
Yeah. I don't know which is worse, though.
Oh my god.
Yeah, because you gotta wonder, like, was he making it up and he just happened to be correct, or did he know something and he's just so fried that he... I mean, Joe Rogan takes him seriously, so...
Yeah. Oh, that's Joe Rogan.
Tim Pool also takes him seriously, to an extent. Those are some of my absolute favorite podcast episodes of all time, is Timcast IRL with Michael Malice and Alex Jones. What an absolute phenomenal 6 hours of comedy. Michael Malice telling knock jokes to keep Alex Jones on track is like, he's the Alex Jones whisperer. It's great.
I don't know why, but I'm getting the mental image of Alex Jones being a horse and the other dude being the horse whisperer.
I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm kind of retarded.
That's the most relatable thing he's ever said.
Yeah.
Well, for me at least, you know.
You're gonna do DMT and you're gonna meet the Clockwork Elves. Like, so you just sit there and you're like, what are you talking about?
You know,
what is going on?
I was gonna say that. I mean, not that you brought up DMT, but like apparently there are beings that you see while you take DMT.
Yeah.
Beans?
Beings. I mean, you could see beans, perhaps.
Bruh, they're walking, talking beans, dude.
I had an incident in college where one of my friends had a friend who was like passing around a vape pen, and I was trying to fit in and be cool, and I was like, yeah, I'll hit the vape. Turns out it was DMT.
Oh no. Oh no, bro.
Which, when you hit a vape of DMT, it does not have the same effect that smoking DMT would have. It's more of a like 3.5 minute long head rush where you look at the wall and there are rhombus beings and they're speaking to you. So I spoke to the parallelograms on the wall, and they told me secrets about myself, and I did not like that. My friend saw cats. One of my other friends who did it on purpose saw the Egyptian god of death, Anubis. We told Tyler he's not allowed to do hallucinogenic drugs anymore because if you see Anubis when you're on DMT, you should probably stop. And then they also didn't tell my roommate that they told him it was THC. I was told it was just nicotine. They told him it was THC, and he thought he was just gonna get a little THC buzz going, and instead he just had like a 3-hour long panic attack. So we joke about DMT, but take DMT seriously.
Don't do drugs, kids.
And don't get peer pressured either.
Yeah,
Peer bad.
don't get peer pressured for sure. Because if you do, it will go horribly wrong.
And if you're gonna,
I've never had peer pressure go well, unless it was like at one time I got peer pressured into going to karaoke night, and that was actually a lot of fun.
But you know, if you're gonna do a drug, make sure you at least do a safe one. Or, you know, I don't mean that. No, I take that back. Don't do drugs at all.
But if you're gonna, at least do it like in a safe environment.
At least make sure you're next to a hospital. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Just don't do drugs.
Yeah, that's a better option. Just stay away.
Moral
from
of the
it.
story: don't do drugs. And if you want to do drugs because 3 guys on a podcast told you it might be an experience, that you need to reevaluate your life choices and who you accept pressure from. You don't know me. I'm a random white guy with fluffy hair.
Yeah, no, but getting off topic a little bit. It was fun. It was a fun little topic, though. I like.
You gotta have some fun tangents. You can't be serious all the time.
Exactly.
I was gonna say, out of all the cryptids that you know of, which is the one that you would not want to mess with at all?
Oh, it's 100% the Wendigo. At all times, it is the Wendigo. Because there's a lot of things out there that I feel like alarm bells would be set off, and I would know not to engage with it. If you hear somebody calling your name in like your little sister's voice from out in the woods while you're camping with your family, you have an instinctive drive to go and figure that one out. And I think that's part of like why these things take kids, but don't, like, why the kids are usually found, is they're taking them to lure people deeper into the woods and to take more, I don't like using this word to describe humans, but nutritious prey.
A perfectly balanced meal.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I default still to the Wendigo on those things, because of that idea that it will call out to you in the voice of somebody you care about to lure you in. I just hate that, because there's such a psychological torture element there that, like, even if you know on the inside you're like, that's definitely not the person it sounds like it is, if you don't help and you're wrong, it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And if you do help and you're right, you're going to die a horrible death. Like, no, I don't want that. That or the Loch Ness Monster, because I don't swim very well.
Well, on the other hand, what cryptid do you think you could beat up in a fist fight?
Well, that's a good one. I don't know. I feel like I could take Mothman, to be honest.
That's where you're wrong, kiddo.
If
he loses, he's just going nice on you.
I don't know. Why is he always hiding in the dark at night? Like, come catch these hands. Like, either Mothman or maybe, I don't know if it counts. Are we talking like bare knuckle, or do I get to have like weapons?
It's like an arena. Like, you just go into the forest and there's this big boxing match. You just walk in.
Okay, so if it's a boxing
fight.
Yeah, if it's a boxing match, no, I'm gonna pick a Kelpie. Because what's a Kelpie gonna do?
True.
That is a sea-based cryptid.
Personally,
I have all the advantages on land.
Personally, I'd pick a jackalope. Just pick them up and just...
Does that count as a
Make into a
cryptid?
nice little belt.
Yeah. What about you, Colton? What would you pick?
Honestly, I think I would lose.
That's
I try not to-
valid.
I
It's a
don't
fair
know
point.
what kind of a backup they might have.
Just Put a randomizer and just go in.
Yeah, why not?
You get the Wendigo.
I would love to get in a sword fight with Grendel,
Ooh.
just to prove that Beowulf ain't shit.
It's nice that you clarified which Wendigo, because I'm pretty sure that it shares a name with a different creature, similar to a Bigfoot, but it does share a name. So I'm happy that you kind of like differentiated between the two.
Mm.
Yeah, honestly, Jackalope would be really really fun to beat up.
I would love to have a jackalope as a like pet though. Imagine how much like clout you could get posting on the internet.
For the longest time, I thought they were real.
I thought so too. You see them like everywhere in New Mexico.
But going back to the whole serious topic for a second here. So when it comes to other cryptids, which one fascinates you the most out of every other cryptid besides the flesh pedestrian?
I like Strigoi because they're such an ancient concept, and we've had so many things develop kind of off the idea, like vampires and werewolves, and a lot of the not werewolves in the West per se, but in Eastern European tradition, a lot of them share characteristics with the Strigoi, and those go back very very far in history. Like you've got Dacian myths about Strigoi that predate the Roman Empire. So I wonder what that is, where it came from, how we ended up with a myth of this kind of like blood-sucking shapeshifter out in the Transylvanian wilderness, up in the Carpathian Basin and down in the Balkans. So that's definitely up there on my list for one of the more fascinating ones. I also been getting into some of the Eastern European stuff lately as I'm trying to expand my horizons, and the Kuln King. The Kuln King I like, partially because it's fun to say his name, and partially because it's a like forest being that punishes children who are disrespectful to the spirits, and I can't really find clarification on what that means. It's just he punishes children that are disrespectful to the spirits, and the Estonians seem to just be like, "Yep, yep, that's what it does." And I'm like, "But what does that mean?" And they're like, "It means what we said." And I'm like, "Okay."
Just step on all those Legos right there.
Yeah. I have the Lore Lodge has a subreddit now, and what I didn't make it. I was just told it exists, and then I went to it and I was like, "Oh, this is here." We also have a Discord server that I am in, and I am like one of the owners, but I don't understand how Discord works at all. I am a 57-year-old man when it comes to Discord. I pop in now and again, and I'm like, "What's happening in here?" And I'm always more disappointed than the last time. But I'm really looking forward to having more of a following from around the world, because I would like people to explain to me what exactly the Slavs are thinking. Slavic folklore is so strange. And everything about the Slavs is a little strange. But it's just... there is not a single like happy story from that region of the world. It's just everything is pain and suffering, and even their happy stories involve some lesser degree of pain and suffering. And I don't get it. So I want to know what happened to them historically that just caused that much trauma.
To be fair, have you seen where they live at?
Yeah, that's true. Russia's not a very nice place.
Yeah.
I like the story of how the Rus came to be, because it's like the Vikings who became the princes of Rus were like, oh yeah, we got messengers from the Slavs saying that they couldn't decide on a ruling class and they asked us to come be their princes. And it's like, that's not what happened. That is such a far-fetched and incredible lie, and you know it. You just made that up, and I'm sure if you went back and you just said that to their faces, they would be like, yeah, like wild lie. I love it. I love medieval history. It is people just got away with so many things.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the what was I gonna bring up again? Totally forgot. It slipped my mind. Oh
I
yes.
know that feeling.
So, sorry. Sometimes I can get scatterbrained because my brain goes in all different sorts of directions. So there's a phenomena, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. It usually occurs when before or after a cryptid sighting, and it's usually people see glowing lights in the woods or
Mm.
a fog to say when before they see a cryptid. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's like a spiritual aspect or a manifestation of something, or
Great question. I do not have a good answer for that.
yeah? Because it usually whenever somebody sees a dog man or a Bigfoot, most commonly with Bigfoot actually, they see a glowing orb in the not in the sky, but rather in the woods at like height level, at human height level, or
Mm.
something along those lines. And then that's when they see the Sasquatch or Bigfoot or Dogman, whatever cryptid you want.
Yeah,
I haven't heard of it with flesh pedestrians as much, but with other cryptids I have. And
the
I've always found
Wendigos
it
take you by surprise.
fun.
Fleshy boys are very stealthy. You do not see
Honestly,
it coming.
honestly, I think every cryptid is the best at stealth.
Yeah, it's
Because
if it
some
exists now when we don't have scientific documentation of it, it's got to be pretty good at hiding.
True.
yeah,
But I don't know with the orbs and whatever. I mean, with something that could be a, you know, we're gonna get a little bit more into some galaxy brain territory here, but like with something that's maybe multi-dimensional, it could be a material byproduct of passing between dimensions. Um, we know that things like redshift and blue shift, where when things are moving forward towards or away from you, you can sense not by eye, but with color detection, you can sense which way it's moving based on the tint of the object's light. So I wouldn't be shocked if you had a similar thing when things are manifesting through some sort of multi-dimensional portal or travel, that you would have glowing lights or fog or something like that would be a byproduct of that. I guess would be if I were to jump down the rabbit hole, that's where I would probably go with it. Especially because you get stuff like you get a lot of descriptions when you encounter paranormal beings, whether they be angels or gods or forest spirits or whatever you're talking about. You get a lot of the same imagery around the world of glowing lights. So I think that there definitely could be an aspect. If we're talking about things that travel through dimensions, then that would absolutely be on the table.
I've actually wanted to get your opinion on what you think, because we already know what you think fleshy boys are, and what type of materialized, I guess, form they take. But what do you think about cryptids such as Bigfoot, Dogman, Mothman? Do you think they're like physical, ethereal, or spiritual in nature, or somewhere in between?
Bigfoot, I honestly do not know. I've heard so many different stories, and I do like the Native American lore around it, where it's they refer to him kind of as an elder brother, as a protector, and that Bigfoot in their lore can choose. And obviously, it sounds like I'm talking about Native Americans as a monolith here. I'm not, but in some of the tribes, Bigfoot can decide whether or not he's going to appear to you. So I think I do like that version of it for Bigfoot. I think the idea that it would be a spiritual being is kind of cool. Makes sense. When it comes to things like Dogman, those seem like more of a physical, corporeal thing. I think it really depends on which one you're talking about. I think some of them are probably more of a spiritual thing. So some of them are, purely, I would say, like, not imaginary, but I guess ethereal. So they do not exist in the physical world, but they can appear as if they do. And then there's probably some degree that are multidimensional, and then there's probably some that are physical. I pin like the Dogman and the Wendigo as physical. Bigfoot maybe as like an interdimensional kind of thing, and then something like a Banshee would be one of the ethereal category, where it's not physically there, but you perceive it to be.
When I think that's a perfect like little move on to the more spiritual side, because I know we've been focusing mainly on cryptids, but it's nice that you bring up a Banshee. Personally, I think that's more of a spiritual thing than a interdimensional thing. It's very funny because since we are native New Mexicans, we're really close to the border, we have our own version of a Banshee called La Llorona. I'm sorry, I may be Mexican, but
I think that is...
It's kind of a tongue twister.
Yeah.
La Llorona.
La Llorona?
Thank you.
All right, no need to flex.
¿Cómo está? ¿Dónde están mis pantalones?
How can you speak better Spanish than me? You don't need to flex on me, okay? But yeah, we have our own version of it, and it's interesting that it's not the exact same. Like the lore behind it's different, of course, but it has the same exact actions as its Irish counterpart, a Banshee, and that brings me to a question: is it more of a water spirit than an actual, somebody who actually died near the river, or is it? And that brings the whole topic
for La Llorona or for the Banshee?
For both, since they both have they're very similar in nature.
Yeah. So Banshee is a compound words, from ban and sheath. Ban meaning woman and sheath meaning fairy mound. So it's woman of the fairy mound. And the idea is that they are harbingers of death from the other world. So they are a form of fae. And they essentially, if you hear one screaming, it means that someone close to you is going to die. And it's actually a position of honor in Gaelic folklore to, if you have a familial banshee that is tied to your family, that means that your family is important. So that one specifically is not tied to water. It's tied to the other world. And where that does get interesting with the water aspect is that in Irish folklore, the last of the Tuatha Dé Danann were said to have set sail west across the sea. So Tolkien references this in the Silmarillion and in Lord of the Rings when the elves sail west to Valinor. which is not a physical realm necessarily, but that's where he got sort of that little tidbit. With La Llorona, from what I understand, it's a much more similar legend to the American Woman in White. And do you guys know the Woman in White urban legend?
I'm familiar with it. I'm not too sure about my co-host here.
Yeah.
No.
Oh,
No
bro.
idea.
So
Of course.
So there are variations. The one I usually go with is the one that was presented in the pilot episode of Supernatural, which is that it is a woman who will appear to drivers on the highway wearing a white gown, and she will ask for a ride home. And then on the way home, she'll try to seduce the male driver of the car who picked her up, and if he takes the bait, basically, then he's she'll only appear to married or committed men, and then if they take the bait, she'll kill them for their infidelity, because the story is that her husband cheated on her, and in a fit of rage, she killed her children and then killed herself, and it's a very dark story, and it appears throughout the U.S. But that's, from what I understand, very similar to the La Llorona legend, is that she drowned her children, and then, or it was that her children drowned and she drowned herself, or she drowned her children, or something like that. But that's why she haunts water, and that if you hear her calling to you, you hear her wailing, then you need to stay away from water. So she's not. It seems to me that she's much more of almost like a water-based version of the Wendigo and the Skinwalker, whereas the Banshee is a harbinger of death. So if you hear, so the Banshee would actually be more similar to Mothman. To really put some people in categories here, she appears before someone dies. Mothman tends to appear before tragic accidents like bridge collapses in Chernobyl, and then La Llorona calls you out to sea to drown you in the ocean or in the river, because she's an angry, vengeful water spirit. And, from what I understand.
Each part of, because this of course didn't originate in America, it originated in Mexico. Depending on which state of Mexico you're from, you get a different variation. But it's always along the same lines of, she drowned her children and she goes across, looking for them in her spirit afterlife. But there are two major differences. Like you said, there is the version where she lures people to the lake to do whatever, and then the other version is similar to the Banshee, in which she, if you hear her cries, somebody in your family or even yourself may perish pretty soon after. So it really depends on which state of Mexico you want to take it from, but that's kind of where I was trying to go with that.
Yeah, I think that may be the result also of just like over time, folktales tend to mix and match, and you can have you got to remember that up until 20 years ago, most people didn't use the internet. So the main way information was spread was through television and radio, and you go back another 100 years and you don't have either of those things. So local legends would be much more varied than they are now. Now you've got, if you take any local legend and you're probably looking at like one of three different archetypes for it at most. For example, I live in southeastern Pennsylvania, and if you 100 years ago were in the town I live in now, then you would have completely different urban legends from somebody one county over. It's just people didn't communicate as much, so you had a lot of different variations on what would be a cultural legend. develop, and then over time you would get a little bit of cultural exchange, and that's why you end up with kind of these mixed and matched versions, I think, now. That's why you've got multiple different versions of the Wendigo in, the Algonquin cultural group. Algonquin is a language group more than anything. So, and that's how a lot of history has been. Germanic peoples were tribally very different from one another in the same way that the Algonquin or the Iroquois would be. But over time they solidified into nation states. But if you were to take, for example, in Germanic mythology, you have in the north in Scandinavia, you've got Odin, and in the south in Germany, you've got Woden, and they're very similar. They have almost all the same characteristics, but they've got some slightly different names and some different powers. It's the same way with a lot of these legends. Like if they all came from something way back when you had much smaller populations, and then populations spread out, and they got different versions of the same story.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track there, definitely. Speaking about this whole thing, I was gonna go ahead and ask you, when it comes to legends, I know you kind of already answered this, but you do think that they're culturally not specific, but like, I don't know how to say it.
Do you like stuff in common?
Yeah, do you think they all come from the same origin?
I think to a large extent, there is a certain point in our history, I think, as a species where we started to develop cultural groups. And I think that it was probably primarily a linguistic difference at that time. But yeah, I think that in a lot of cases, if you take, linguistic groups and you trace back what their mythology was, then they tend to share stories. Even when you get into like fairly different cultures, like the Germanic tribes of the late Roman period and the Norwegians. Same language group, similar cultural traditions, similar religion, completely different from Celts, even though they lived, culturally, even though their borders were next to each other. So I think if you trace it back to where we start to get those cultural groups and those linguistic branches, and I reference European history and linguistics and mythology and everything a lot because that's my field of study. But it's very similar with Native American, with South American indigenous, with Asian, African. You get in a lot of cases the linguistic groupings are where you find the mythological groupings. So I think that to that extent, yes, a lot of our stories and our legends come from the same place, and maybe you can trace some of them back even farther. But I wouldn't say that, everything comes from one tradition. I would say there's probably, once we started to develop different languages, that's where things probably started to branch off.
So I don't know how good you are on time.
I'm starting to get to the end of my time over here.
Okay, so we'll
It's
go
about
ahead
9 o'clock here.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
All right, I forgot.
East Coast.
Time change, yeah. Okay, so we'll go ahead and finish this up here.
Sure.
Honestly,
Hi, buddy.
I think we had a really great talk.
Yeah, I enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's nice to talk to somebody who actually knows what the heck I'm talking about. Because I can honestly talk to him for hours about this, and he'll be like, "Oh."
If there's one thing I'm good at is at listening.
Yeah. So
every friendship has to have a talker and a listener.
yeah, no. So it's good to converse with somebody who knows what we're talking about and is clearly extremely passionate about what they do. I know I kind of had some more questions lined up, but we are running out of time here, so maybe
Yeah.
we can finish this up another day if you feel like it. And honestly, it's been a fun time.
Yeah, I'm willing to pop on another time too. I have plenty of space in my schedule at the moment. Considering I do TikTok full time, I hate myself. I was caught in 4K. Somebody posted there was a poll in a Facebook group I'm in 22 weeks ago, and it was is it immature to have TikTok? And I said it's not immature to have the app. But it is childish to post on it. And somebody took a screenshot of my account with 270,000 followers, and I was like, "Damn, that hurted."
So of course everybody probably knows who you are, but for the short amount of people, sorry, the small amount of people that don't, do you want to go ahead and plug in your socials or
Oh, sure.
everything?
Yeah,
like
thank
that?
you. Yeah, so I'm pretty easy. I am the Aidan Matthis on literally everything, which is the word the THE AIDAN MATTIS, like the former Secretary of Defense, who is my fifth cousin.
Oh wow!
Whoa!
I think, yeah.
Oh, name dropping.
Ancestry.com, wild thing. But yeah, so I'm the Aidan Matthis on just about everything. That's TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. And then on YouTube, you can find me and my co-host, my editor, Aidan Thornbury. We're both named Aidan. We go by Aidan Squared at times, but you can find us at the Lore Lodge, and that's I think YouTube and Patreon are both the Lore Lodge. And if you want to help us pay rent, we would really love Patreon. but also just subscribing on YouTube is huge. So that's we just made partner. We just made the partner program. We're celebrating. Yeah, thank you. We were sitting there because YouTube only updates the viewing hours every 24, 48 hours, and we're sitting there like, all right, 3470, 3860, 3940. You got to get to 4,000, and we're sitting there like, come on, get there. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And and I'm gonna plug my editor, obviously, Aidan Thornbury. He's Director Aidan on TikTok, and I think also Instagram. Yeah, I think so. I might be wrong about that, but yeah, that's us. That's what we do. I post incessantly on TikTok. It's like 9 posts a day. It's kind of ridiculous. Somebody told me I need to post more today, and I was like, I physically can't. I don't know what you want from me. I'm sorry. Yeah, so that's me.
Well, it's been. Were you gonna say something?
I was going to say that I know we talked about the LBL incident, and if anyone wants to know more, we have another episode on our podcast that you can go listen to. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah, it's one of our older ones, but yeah,
Pretty fun.
All of them are pretty fun, actually. A lot of knowledge. But
knowledge.
Ty Lopez. All right. Okay.
Classic.
So I was your host, Charlie Cage, and
your co-host Colton.
This was our guest,
Aidan Matthis.
And thank you guys for watching.